Welcome into Sports Memos Betting Podcast, college basketball for Thursday night's betting card with mid-major Matt, college basketball expert himself. Welcome into the pod. How you doing?
Drew, doing well. Really good. Had a 4-0 day on Wednesday. Feeling good right now about how college basketball is, and then ready to talk about a couple of mid-major games coming up on today because we're taping this on Thursday morning.
We are Thursday morning. Shout out to Matt right now. Very, very late Wednesday night, Thursday morning on the East Coast. It is almost 10 p.m. here on the West Coast. Matt, let's just give the people what they clicked on the link for here. Some more winners than losers. We can start off rotation number Thursday night's card here, 619, 620, 7 p.m. Eastern tip, Belmont, Murray State. We're starting off here, Matt, because it is a watch and win opportunity. ESPN2, 147.5 the total. We're seeing Pick'em. We're seeing Murray State -1 at home. We're also seeing Belmont -1 on the road. So depending where you're shopping here, either team could be the favorite. Total of 147.5. What are you thinking for Belmont versus Murray State? ESPN2 Thursday night.
Well, these are clearly the class of the Ohio Valley this year, as they always are. If you go back to last year, each team won on each other's home court. Murray won 77-65 at Belmont. Belmont won 79-66 at Murray. And the fascinating part of that was we know Belmont is one of these teams that shoots a ton of threes. Well, last year, Murray held them to 14 of 54 from three-point land, and that's one of the reasons why they were able to get the win in Belmont. And then, of course, they lost at home. There's no Ja Morant in this game. He is tearing things up in the NBA. So here's a couple of things to consider for this matchup. Belmont's 14-5. They're 5-1 in the OVC, but of course, none of the other teams really matches up or levels up to what Murray State is. Belmont on the road this year has lost 79-72 at Illinois State. That was way back in November. 60-55 at St. Louis, and then 87-82 at Eastern Washington. So they've had some struggles on the road. The team has scored 70 points or more 17 times this season. 56 on the tempo scale when it comes to KenPom, and they're 22nd in terms of having the quickest offensive possession length. They're really efficient when it comes to the twos, 9th best in the country at two-pointers, and they're actually playing some pretty good defense here. On the Murray side, 13-5, 6-0 in the CAA. They've won 7 straight, and they have not lost at home this year, shooting 53.6% from two-point land. They've scored 70 points or more in every home game except for one, when they scored 69 against Southern back in November. But they're actually playing defense too. So they've held 6 opponents to less than 60 points. So when I look at this one, Drew, I would lean to the over here. But look, in theory, there should be a lot of efficient offense here because these two teams know how to score the bucket. But how much are their numbers skewed by the fact they're playing the lesser teams? They're playing the Jacksonville States. They're playing the Moorhead States, the lower levels of the Ohio Valley. To me, this is a TV game. This is a Murray State team that has some veterans, but there is some youth mixed in. Who knows how they handle the spotlight here? You've got a Belmont team with some more veterans. Of course, they made the tournament last year. They won that game against Temple in the first 4. So to me, this is more of a watch game. I'm going to give you some information here. The over does look tasty, but with two teams playing defense here and what is going to be a tighter game, we may see some lower scoring totals than probably expected in this one.
Yeah, it's an interesting take in terms of the total on that because you're right. I mean, both offenses, can be electric, but at the same time, who have they played? Where are these points coming from? Kind of a tricky part of each and every college basketball handicap. We got another one here, Matt. Same time slot, 7 p.m. Eastern. Unfortunately, as we start talking these mid-major games, this one likely not on TV, but heck, who knows? Maybe around that region it will be. James Madison, William and Mary. We got 151.5 as the total. Seeing 9 in the hook. That's William and Mary laying at home.
By the way, if you are looking for a lot of the CAA games, they have a contract with Flow Sports, which is one of these websites where basically they run their own stuff. They have articles and stuff. So like if you really wanted to watch this game, you could go to Flow Sports. I think they have subscription packages that could either be
free.
Yeah, and I don't think it is. William & Mary used to air their games for free on their own website, and I don't know if they still do it or not, but if you are looking for this game, it's going to be on Flow Sports. It may be on ESPN Plus or whatever, too. But, yeah, this will be one of the games that's not necessarily on the 4-letter networks here. William & Mary, we've done this the last couple of weeks here on the podcast on Thursday, so I want to keep it going with William & Mary, and if you've watched them all, you know what I think about them. They're 14-6. They're coming off their first loss in the CAA. They got smoked by Drexel in Philadelphia last weekend, 84 to 57. 6-0 at home. They've scored 75 or more in all but 2 games there. If you remember William & Mary last year, they were nothing but overs, especially at home. They played no defense. They had a ton of shooters. They just poured in the points. They're playing at a slower pace this year than they did last year, but they're also a lot more effective. 39th in the country in 3-point percentage, 31st in 2-point percentage. They've got the Twin Towers. Nathan Knight, get to know that name because he's going to be in the NBA next year. 6'11", 6'10" kid out of the New York area. He's a double-double machine. At one point, and I don't know if it's still the case, he's had the most double-doubles in the NCAA. Andy Van Vliet, the transfer who came over from Wisconsin, he's a 7-footer. He shoots 3-pointers. The over has hit in 21 of the last 29 games at home for William & Mary, but just 3 of 6 this year, so that's something to look at. The Dukes, JMU, 8-10, 1-6 in the CAA. They've lost 4 straight and 6 of their last 7. JMU's 3-5 on the road. The road wins were at ODU, which is not that bad. 80-78. That's the bigger thing, is that they managed to get Old Dominion to play a higher scoring game. They won at Fordham. That's not great. 75-69. But once again, this is a Fordham team who wants to play a slower game. And they won at UNC Wilmington a couple of weeks ago, 64-60. They lost by 31 at UVA. They lost by 13 at Mason. They lost by 23 at Radford. They also have a 16 and an 8-point road loss. 8th quickest tempo in the country. So they want to go. They've got the 7th shortest offensive possession time as well. Defensively, they don't force turnovers, and they have a very porous defense. The one thing I'm worried about here, Drew, and we're doing this as we are at Thursday morning, the total jumped down, I believe, 3.5 points here. So as we tape this thing, I want people to kind of hold right now because I want to make sure there's no flu. I want to make sure there's no injuries in this thing because to me, this one seems like an over at the number of 151.5. Last year, William & Mary won 70-66 at JMU. They won 79-74 at home. I want to make sure there's no injuries, no flu or anything when everybody wakes up on Thursday morning. But if this number's around 151, I think I'm looking at the over here. I think JMU's defense will be more than inviting to allow a bunch of points. And I think William & Mary gets some frustrations out after that 84-57 loss to Drexel. But once again, we've got to – because, look, when you see moves in these smaller conference games, it's usually somebody knows something. Like, this is not Duke and North Carolina where a lot more people have a lot more knowledge. This is the CAA where people like me and several other handicappers who specialize in this stuff will be playing this game. So let's wait. Follow me on Twitter at MidMajorMatt. We'll do some digging when we all wake up on Thursday morning. But if this total's around 151.5 and there's no injuries or no situations here, I think the over is worth a look here with in this game.
Follow him on Twitter at MidMajorMatt. Myself on Twitter at Drew Martin Betts. He's working through the night here. This is late on Wednesday night on the West Coast, early Thursday morning as we're breaking down the Thursday night card here in college basketball. And Matt, you know, you talk about it. It opened, 154.5. Now we're seeing 151.5, a 3-point move towards the under. And you bring up the fact, you know, somebody knows something in these small conferences. Do you think it could be a setup where, you know, they're doing a couple small bets with the low limits and then come tomorrow morning when, you know, the sports books 8 a.m. open up to the larger limits, then somebody really steams it up?
You know, it's funny when you say that, and I know we're not supposed to admit weaknesses. Line movement is one of the things that I'm still working with. You know, I've been in this industry for, about 5-6 years or so, but I'm still honing on the line movement thing because it's tough. Sometimes you sit there and you say, all right, I'm going to play it at this number. If it gets to that number, you go to bed, you think, all right, maybe you got a shot. You wake up the next morning and that number's gone. So you really have to kind of play a guessing game. This is flu season now. This is season where things come up. This is 2 schools that who knows if they have an injury report. You know, I know people at some of the campuses, so tomorrow morning I'll be making some texts and sending some things out to some of the people I know involved in the program. But you're right. There could be somebody setting this thing up. We could wake up tomorrow. By the time this video is on YouTube, the line could be back up to 155. And then I kind of have to make a decision. Do you take the 151.5 now and hope there's no flu, no injuries that aren't going to pop up later, or do you wait and potentially miss the number? To me, the ones you miss they're not losses. They're mental losses, but they're not actual losses. So to me, I'd rather wait, see if I can get some more information. If I miss the number, I miss the number.
It does happen, missing the number. It's not a good feeling, but obviously MidMajorMatt knowing the CA very well. So follow him on Twitter at MidMajorMatt. Check him out, sportsmemo.com, college basketball handicapper, along with myself, Drew Martin, Brent Crow, another good college basketball handicapper. And he'll be on Friday as we'll break down the Saturday card for college basketball. Of Wednesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, big cards in college basketball usually. So those 3 days, I really like to get after it, and I think you can find some value. Matt, when we start talking January, February, I know a lot of people like to be betting college basketball in March. I don't know, man. For whatever reason, over the history of the last 4 or 5 years since I've been doing this, I guess, quote unquote, professionally, I've had the most success in January and February. Do you see the same kind of results for yourself?
Well, I think we're getting smarter as handicappers with Ken Pomeroy, who's the number one thing. If you're a college basketball guy, you need to buy the Ken Pom subscription. It's a reasonable price. It's probably more worth it to buy that than some of our picks potentially. But of course, we want you to buy our picks. But I feel like we're getting rematches. We're getting look-ahead situations. The smarter handicappers are saying, okay, well, they've got a game against X, but game Y coming up next is a lot bigger. So let's take a look at the situation here. And there's a lot more things to consider. Look, in November and December, you're trying to beat the odds makers before they figure teams out. Let's say there's a team in your area. You know a lot about them. Maybe you beat Vegas. All right, but by January, we're now in conference play, so they've got more information. So we have to adjust. Now there's second meetings. Now there's neutral court games. This weekend, you've got the SEC Big 12 Challenge, which throws a monkey wrench into everything because then, you've got, a whole new thing to handicap considering these teams are stepping out of conference. So there's a lot more information. If you take the time to look at everything, then you should be able to find success. And certainly following Drew and I would also help you.
And you bring up the Big 12 SEC Challenge, man. There's some major matchups this weekend. Some stuff I'm really excited about. We got the number one team in the nation going down to Gainesville to play Florida, talking about Baylor versus Florida. I mean, really, there's stacked matchups all over. I'm really happy that those two conferences are doing that. I think college basketball needs to do more of that, especially the week before the Super Bowl where kind of the spotlight can be on the hardwood. We got 8 Eastern getting back to the games here, Matt. UTSA, University of Texas San Antonio at North Texas, a battle for Texas from the mid-major teams. I believe the Sun Belt action, 141 being the total. North Texas laying doubles at home, seeing -10 pretty much across the board here, Matt.
So Conference USA action here. Texas San Antonio is 9-10, 3-3 in the Conference USA. It's a team I had circled entering the year because last year I made a boatload of money on them, and I got off to a horrible start. They played Oklahoma in Oklahoma. If I remember correctly, there was at least 5 or 6 other handicappers besides me between WagerTalk and Sports Memo who were on UTSA. It was really close at halftime, and they got blitzed in the second half. And then they went on a terrible start where they lost games to teams they were favored to. This Roadrunner team is way better than their record. They've got one of the better backcourts in the country that no one talks about with the Jackson kid. It's Javon, I believe. I don't want to butcher his name. And then Keaton Wallace is the other guy in the backcourt. They play at a quick pace, 19th quickest pace. The problem is they're allowing teams to shoot 55% from two-point land, but they shoot well from three, and they're a top 10 free throw shooting team, which is key when it comes to these road games. If you look at North Texas, they're 12-8, 6-1 in the Conference USA. They've won 6 straight, and they're blowing teams out left and right. So why would I want to get out in front of them? They play the 349th slowest pace in the country, okay? So that means there's not going to be a ton of possessions in this game. And when you look at a double-digit number here, 5 to 6 possessions are not a bad thing to get with a very competent opponent. Last year, UTSA won this game 76-74 at home. They were a 2-point underdog. North Texas doesn't really have a ton of weaknesses, although they do turn it over about 22.2% of the time on their possessions here. I just think UTSA is a live dog here. I think they can play a lower-scoring game. Of course, they want to run, and it's hard to instill your pace on the road. But I just think UTSA is a valuable dog here with getting a ton of points, a really good backcourt that's going to stress North Texas a little bit. We could see a game played in the 60s, and if this game's played in the 60s, low 70s, I think UTSA has enough offense to make things interesting. Don't forget the free throw shooting thing certainly will come into play in a game like this. And so I think UTSA is a very live dog on Thursday. They're a team that I'm ready to back despite the 9-10 record and despite the fact that North Texas is steamrolling teams. I could look wrong. North Texas could steamroll them again on Thursday, but I think we're getting a very competent bunch and a very nice number on Thursday.
We got one more game I want to break down before we get to questions. But, Matt, first off, want to talk about your night tonight. One, as a handicapper, I believe you had a pretty hot night, 4-0, right?
4-0 night tonight. We did the old Chicago State first half fade with California Baptist. They covered that number. Had the over in the CSUN Cal Santa Barbara game, which hit. Had a first half over. I like playing these first half overs. So this is the thing that I was discussing with some people. I had the first half over in the Sanford Furman game, and you being the totals guy, I'd love to bounce this off of you. So we see a lot of these higher totals, the 150s. There's 155s out there and stuff like that. But I'm noticing in the first half, you're getting a total that's less than half. So tonight, the Sanford game was around, I think, a 148 total. And I got the total in the first half at 70 and a half. I think it was 71 in some places. To me, there's some value there. Now, look, I know we're getting about 19 minutes of freedom, and then that last minute, you're getting less possessions because, the teams are lining up. They want to take timeouts, set things up, get last shots. But to me, Drew, is there not value with that first half over in some of these shootouts, considering these two teams can score and you're getting it less than half the full number?
Possibly. You could be onto something there, Matt. I will say this, though. I mean, I've brought something into my numbers, which I'm still working on. Right now, depending on pace and offensive and defensive efficiency, I try to make my number off of that. And then I go back and I try as much as I can watch, because I've been, on the wrong side of some of these, and I've been on the right side of a few too. But different coaches, different teams start fouling at different times, I've noticed. Whereas, like Wake Forest, I'll just throw it out there, for example, I am going to be very, very hesitant in betting the Demon Deacons under the total, especially if they're like a small underdog or even a big underdog, because they were down against Virginia Tech. This was 2 Tuesdays ago. It was actually a $2 Tuesday place. Some of the listeners out there might have been on this as well. And we were kind of on pace to hit the bet, Matt. It was, I believe, under 127 and a half. And we're on pace pretty much the whole time. Not killing it, but on pace, holding on. And sure enough, the Demon Deacons are down like 10 with 3 minutes left in the game. And they just start fouling right when they get past half. And I'm like, oh, this is over. Like the second time that happened, I'm like, tear up this ticket. It is over. Very, very frustrating. So and it's not only that game. I've seen it happen other times where you really got to factor in how much these teams are going to score. So, I mean, how much these teams are going to foul. So I guess the point I'm getting at is, yes, there could be value on the over, but that is the reason why the first half total isn't exactly halfway for the full game. As I know, that, right?
Well, yeah, and I've had two cases. So I hit my first one. I had the first half over in the Gonzaga-Santa Clara game. I hit that, and then I lost my next two by 2 points. I lost the Gonzaga-BYU one by 2 points, and then I forget what the third one was. I lost that by 2 points, and then tonight the one went over by a lot. But the problem is, as we would talk about, Drew, 4-minute segments, I like to play this stuff is. So if there's a bad 4-minute segment, and then you've got that 1 minute mark where there's not going to be as many possessions, then we're condensing things. And of course, I'm losing the second half fouling. I'm losing all the things that could be involved. But to me, I think it's worth a shot. If you find two pace teams, like, Gonzaga and BYU play with pace, and the defense in terms of BYU's defense is not great. Gonzaga's offense is really efficient. Like, they're going to score and they're going to push the pace there. So I felt like that was a good situation to play a first half over. Now, it lost by 2 points, probably because the first 4 minutes were brick fest and they just kept throwing bricks up. Plenty of shots, but you didn't get the output that you wanted. So it's just something I'm looking at now in terms of some of these shootouts. If I can get a first half where I know that I'm at least going to get a lot of shots and a lot of possessions, it's worth a look at.
Well said, Matt. And guys, we got a special coupon code for this podcast, MMM29 at checkout for Mid-Major Matt's 3-day all-access pass, just $29, less than $10 a day. MMM29 at checkout, Mid-Major Matt's 3-day all-access. One more game here, then we'll get to the questions. We got 661-662 Seattle at Grand Canyon, 9 p.m. Eastern tip here. 138 being the total, -2. That's Grand Canyon at home, Matt.
So I know some people, if they're watching the podcast, they're like, why are you touching on these games? Well, first off, I'm the mid-major guy, so that's why. But I also think I like to think that we do some information. We talked about Grand Canyon, last week, 2 weeks ago? We brought up their game against Chicago State, because I want everybody to know how to handle Chicago State and how to handle Grand Canyon. Tonight I had the first half against Chicago State on the road, and it covered. Grand Canyon, if you look at them on face value, 7-11, 2-2 in the WAC. They've won 3 of their last 5, but if you notice, their roster has changed a little bit. They got some midseason transfers. Mikey Dixon, a transfer from St. John's, has gotten back in the lineup, and they were 3-3 since he's returned. The lineup looks a whole lot better. You're getting some value here with a team that doesn't turn it over a lot. They're 36th in terms of turnover percentage on Ken Pomeroy. Their defense isn't great. It could be better. And they're also only 4-5 at home. They've got one of the better home courts in the country. Nobody knows about it, but like if you turn on a Grand Canyon game, their student section is nuts, like certifiably nuts. It's ridiculous how great and how loud it is. Dan Marley's doing a great job there. So they've got a Seattle team, face value once again. Seattle's 10-10, 3-2 in the WAC. They've won 3 of their last 4. But if you look, there's 353 teams. Seattle is 340th in the country at 2-point percentage and 289th in 3-point percentage. They're horrendous offensively. They're starting to put up good numbers, but once again, the WAC is not a great conference. They're 1-6 on the road. The only road win was Chicago State, so it doesn't really count. Last year, these two teams played 3 times. Grand Canyon won in the WAC tournament 84-75. 5 days before that, they played in Seattle. Seattle won 83-76. Grand Canyon won 71-57 at home. Bottom line here is I like the home team. I think the -2 is a little short. If you want to, if this is a personal preference thing, take Grand Canyon on the money line. If the juice may be about the same, maybe slightly more, it's whatever your preference is. I think Grand Canyon wins the game, which is why I like the money line. -2 is about the same area where you could consider the money line, and the -2 are about the same. But I think there's some value here with Grand Canyon, and they're a team that we're going to continue to talk about on the podcast, that there could be some value continuing going forward.
Good stuff, Matt. Breaking down the games. We got questions coming up. I did want to correct myself. I think I said UTSA, North Texas, and the Sun Belt. Of course, they are Conference USA. Not sure why I said that, as much as I bet those 2 conferences. But Matt, talking about you and what you did tonight, handicapping wise, good night for you. But also, you follow the Richmond program really well, working for ESPN Richmond there. Anything you wanted to throw out about the Spiders?
So tonight they had their perfect situation of a look ahead, because if you look, Spiders, they're on the outside looking in right now in bracketology. This was the game for them to look ahead because they're home and they got Dayton coming in on Saturday and they got their first game with VCU on Tuesday. And the Spiders handled things very well. I think some people who look at them on the surface saw that they lost Blake Francis. He's out for 3 to 5, 4 to 6 weeks. I think he's due a checkup here in the next week or so. He was their leading scorer, and I think that scared some people. But, this offense is really good. They basically have the same roster back as last year now, even without Francis, and they're all a year later, and they're starting to play a little bit of defense. Look, the George Mason game wasn't great defensively, but I also felt like it was a free-flowing game. It was one of those games where they never felt threatened, and so the defense let down a little bit. I'll be very interested to see what the line is on Saturday when Dayton comes in. I may look at the over. I may look at Richmond, depending upon what the line is. The Spiders are going to be a very interesting team going forward. They've got an offense that's going to be very hard to stop, and they've got a better defense than they've played in the past. I'll be looking at the Spiders potentially, and then who knows, that game next Tuesday against VCU will be interesting. And then after those 2 games, I believe they have George Washington. There could be the letdown spot after those 2 rivalry games coming up ahead. So let's keep our eyes on the Spiders, and we'll revisit this thing next week when we have the next podcast.
Sounds good, guys. And this is a mainstay here during college basketball, having mid-major Matt on late on Wednesday nights, going over the Thursday cards. So a lot of shelf time for the podcast so everyone can get their bets down. Little questions here from Twitter. Big shout out to the guys that asked the question. Of course, going forward, hit us up on Twitter at MidMajorMatt or at Drew Martin Bets or at Sports Memo. All the questions will get answered here on the podcast. Any college basketball, overall betting advice, life advice, we'll answer it all for you on this podcast. We got Rain Man on Twitter at SharpsideLV asking, what is the best way to cope down swings? I know it's the nature of the beast. We can't run hot all the time, but I just hate losing. And I think he's talking about when you're losing, what's the best way to kind of deal with that. In Rain Man, one thing that I do as a bettor, and I learned this, I kind of learned how to sports bet on my own, also from a really good sports bettor, Aaron Renning, also Andrew Lang as well. And one thing that I do is when it's just not going well, when I'm not seeing it well, my numbers are off, I'm just not betting very well, I'll just really cut down the volume. One play a day. I'll take days off, 2-3 days off, and then come back at it, start again, because a lot of times it is streaky. I mean, I know what you're speaking of. I know a lot of sports bettors out there know what you're talking about. And when you're seeing it well, you'll knock off 4 out of 5, 8 out of 10. And then when you're not, sometimes it can turn the exact opposite way. So that's what my advice would be, is just go really low volume when it's not working well. I know a lot of people would have a lot more money in their pocket if they were able to do that. I know I would have in earlier years when I started getting into sports betting as my true job. So that's my advice. Just kind of lower your volume when it's not going well. Matt, did you have anything on that one?
Well, I agree with you. I'll admit it. I'm very honest as a handicapper. I've had a terrible college basketball season since the last month. I mean, I started out in November. I didn't have very good November. Had a poor December, but since January flipped, and like mid-December or so, I flipped the script and I'm starting to do better. I'm starting to see things better, but it's very frustrating. There are times where I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do basketball anymore. I don't want to, but it is cyclical. Like if you are losing games very closely, if there's, totals where free throws come in, those things seem to come around. So when you're cold, they just continue to pile on. And when you're hot, you seem to hit everything. So to me, as Drew said, I cut down on my volume. I look at how I'm handicapping games. There's going to be times where you just miss things. And then you say, okay, well, I'm not going to do this for college basketball or for college football or for baseball. If you have a team or two that you're doing really well on, then just focus on them. Don't look at anything else. Just focus in on the Angels or, BYU football or the New England Patriots, whatever it is. And that's a good way to reduce your volume and stay in your zone, because it can get overwhelming. Saturdays, there's 120 games? Don't look at it as 120 games. Look at it as a conference you like, or look at it as an area you like. I only do the Virginia schools. You only do the Montana schools, whatever it is. Reduce your volume. Get through it. Everybody, you know what you're doing. I assume that you, as a smart person who's tweeting us right now, knows what you're doing. So, everything will be okay. We all have our downturns and our upswings. You just got to ride the wave and try and end it the best you can.
Absolutely. And just to finish this one off, don't bet too much on any one game. Don't bet too much overall. Don't bet anything you can't afford to lose. But yeah, good stuff there, Matt. And thank you for the question, Rain Man. We got another one here, Matt, from Brett Morrison on Twitter at Pancake411. Life advice question here. What's the best excuse I can give my bookie to try and get an extension to have to pay him? ? You want to have it this, Matt?
Ooh, how do I extend? Well, I've never dealt with a bookie, thank goodness. And I've only seen them in movies, so they're big, and they usually carry a billy club, right, or a gun or something. I don't know. The best way to get an extension is, Drew, I don't know. I feel like this is one of those things. Maybe you roll up with a bowl of pennies, and you say, look, this is all I got right now, and they could make the guy count. I mean, those guys are usually understanding if you have a reason. Maybe bring a child with you or bring an animal with you. What do you think, Drew? You're in Vegas. This probably happens regularly in Vegas.
Well, I would definitely not bring a child. I don't know. Maybe you can. I mean, most bookies just want you to pay in any form or fashion. And actually, no, here in Vegas, no bookies at all. There's really no need for them, with all the apps and everything. But I have dealt with them in the past. And my advice is, one, they're just looking to get paid. So let's just say you owe them $1,000 just for round numbers, and you don't have $1,000. Well, a lot of bookies are just going to be, all right, well, I need something. So, 250, and now you're on the hook for 750 next Tuesday. Okay, that's fine. One, you got your extension, so just keep doing that each week. A lot of bookies are open for that. Just ask them. Another thing is bookies will be kind of your friend, quote unquote, if you refer them your friends. Like if your friend asks for a bookie, now make sure that they're kind of legit people, because if your friends go, taking advantage of bookie, now you're going to be kind of up the tree as well and just get enemies. You don't want that kind of life. But if you're referring them good clients, a lot of times bookies, at least in some of the dealings I've had, if you get down and you're like, oh man, it's been rough. Sometimes they'll even offer. They're like, oh, well, just pay me half, something of that nature. And that's really cool. If you owe him $1,000, then he just takes $500. And now next time you look at your account, it's, wash at 0, that's a really good feeling. Now, that doesn't happen a lot, but if you're on a bad run, sometimes it will. Also, another thing that, like if you're a futures better, let's say you bet like season win totals or something of that nature, and your season win total isn't looking good. It's week 6 and the team you bet the over and they only got 2 wins, something like that. Sometimes you can be like, all right, man, I just lost again. Let's wash wash those out, And so even though you don't owe them it yet, you're gonna owe them it. Sometimes, at least the last time I asked that works. So that's one tip for me. That actually happened this year. Other than that, I mean, those are 2 things that I do, or have done. I don't want to make it sound like I'm doing that all the time because I'm not. But just talking off the top of my head, those are 2 things I'm throwing out. But yeah, mainly the referring like friends is one way to kind of get on the good side of your bookie. So those are 2 good questions there. Appreciate that, guys. And yeah, if feel free out there, listeners, to hit us up on Twitter at MidMajorMatt. You can also email in as well at support@sportsmemo. We'll read them off that way. At Drew Martin Bets on Twitter as well. So Mid-Major Matt, that's it for questions for this podcast. And did you want to throw out anything else before we shut this down?
Yeah, so I want to have a quick discussion about something I did today on Twitter that was not exactly well received. And I think we should at least present both sides of the thing because you are a very seasoned handicapper and I am somewhat as well. And I did somewhat of a no-no in somewhat of the industry today, but it won. It was a bet that won today. So I basically went on Twitter today and I said, there are 3 teams I like, but not their current prices. So I did a 3-team teaser, and I recommended a 3-team teaser with Rhode Island, which I teased from -3.5 to +2.5, or -3 to +3, whatever it was. There were 2 different numbers out there. Iowa, which was, I think, 5.5, so I teased it to +0.5, which basically means that I need them to win. And then Loyola Chicago, which I think was 7.5, and I teased it down to 1.5, which means it essentially won. There might have been some 7, so then essentially it teased down to 1. And I got a tweet from someone who said, that's not a good bet. Teasers aren't very good. You're the reason why, blah, blah. He was telling me things. Now, it won. So if it was a bad bet, it still won anyway. But I would love to get your thoughts. To me, this is me talking. There are going to be games out there where I like a team. I think they're going to win. I thought Rhode Island was going to win. I thought Loyola Chicago was going to win. I thought Iowa was going to win. So to me, why not do a teaser? Make it big enough to make it plus money or make it a decent juice. And then that way I get more value and more cushion to where essentially these teams win their games. I'm not going to say like, look, if it's -14, I'm not teasing it down to -8. That's just ridiculous. But to me, if there's teasers that could take a team from a medium favorite to a essentially win situation or a slight underdog, to me, it seems like nothing wrong. Now you could tell me I'm wrong and educate the listeners properly if you'd like.
No, I see what you're doing. I mean, I don't know, man. I've heard from a lot of people in the industry the only teasers that are really plus EV are going through key numbers in the NFL just because it's a less volatile outcome sport, meaning the final score falls around what the odds makers are going to say more in the NFL than say like college basketball totals or something like that. So that's what would make me shy away from it. And also in the NFL, you want to be crossing key numbers. So like betting a team from, 6 down to pick them or something like that, where you're crossing the 3. If you can cross 7s and cross 3s, that's supposedly, at least according to who you ask, can be a smart bet in the NFL. I've never teased a game outside of the NFL, and full disclosure, I mean, I bet sides and I bet totals, -110 model, and better if I can find it. I really don't do parlays or teasers or anything like that, so I can't speak too much on it, Matt, but I could see where the guy on Twitter was telling you, that's not a smart bet, just because you need so much to happen. And in college basketball, I mean, it's a pretty volatile sport, both totals and sides. So I would probably shy away from teasers. I know that doesn't help you much, but that's really all I got on that subject, man.
Well, and I'm not saying you should do it willy-nilly. To me, it's if you want to do a 6-point teaser and you've got 3 games where you like the team that's -6, and you want to tease them down to essentially a pick 'em because you're confident they're going to win, but it might be a close game. But I'm not saying if it's minus 15, if it's minus 27, tease it down to minus 21. That's different. But like if it's around that area, it's not for everybody. But to me, and I like to think differently sometimes. I bet first halves, I bet first quarters. That may not be a great bet either. But like to me, if I find value, I don't. It won tonight, and if it lost, he had every right to laugh at me. But it's just because once again, I continue to educate the people who watch. So to me, I would say teasers aren't terrible. You would say that they're not the best, and there's probably a lot of people who will tell you that. But once again, it's what you're comfortable with. If you are very confident on 3 teams winning, and then you just want more comfort with regards to the number, to me, it doesn't seem like anything wrong. You just got to get the value. Like I wouldn't lay a lot of juice. If there's a casino that's going to charge you a lot for something like that, then yeah, say no and don't do it. Maybe do a money line parlay instead with the 3 things. But like, it's just something I think it's something to consider because it's an option out there for a lot of the viewers.
All right. I'm picking up what you're laying down, Matt. And guys out there, remember to reach out to us on Twitter. Any questions you want, at Midmajor Matt, at Drew Martin Bets. And Matt, off of a 4-0 day, check him out at sportsmemo.com. 5% play. I believe, what, is this your first 5% play of the year, Matt?
Yeah, 5% play first time this year. I don't do it very lightly. I think I looked back since my year and a half on Sports Memo. I've only done 4 across the sport, so I don't really do this very often, but there's a total that I like. And then as soon as we're done, I'm going to get off and I'm going to put it on the website and hope and pray that it hits. But yeah, first 5% of the college basketball season.
All right, check it out, sportsmemo.com. And guys, that play is $40 at the website, or you can get his next 3 days, which will include that play and every other play tomorrow, the next day, and the next day for only $29, less than $10 a day. I suggest that at sportsmemo.com. Midmajor Matt, his 3-day all access package, huge discount with the coupon code MMM29 at checkout. Huge shout out to Matt. It's well past midnight on the East Coast, breaking down the Thursday card here each and every late night Wednesday night with Midmajor Matt. I am Drew Martin. Guys, we will be back on cross-country flight tomorrow. So on Friday, we got Brent Crow coming in to break down the Saturday CBB action. So best of luck until then. Be safe. Don't bet too much. And best of luck with your bets.